We built this platform for stories unfold. Mindset to manuscript, speaking truth bold.
Diverse voices from the street to the stage. Your voice deserves to shake this ground. We coach, we write, we amplify sound.
Mindset to manuscripts on the scene. Now's the time, the place, the dream. Tell your story and get it straight. Mindset to manuscript. Mindset to manuscript. Hosted by JT Key.
I am so excited, everyone, to be here this episode of Mindset to Manuscript with JT. Speak Your Truth. I have Dr. Felesia Bowen here today, and she is a scholar, a healer, a professor, and a truth teller. And today we're going to really dive into some of those truths that we don't always get an opportunity to know about until they happen. Baby boomers and the things that we don't know in terms of those living wills and planning for deaths and just all those things that can become messy if we're not prepared for them, if we don't exactly understand the things ahead of time. Expectations sometimes are tainted. We think that people are prepared and they may not be. So Dr. Bowen is going to come and just share her truth with us and just talk about her journey and some of the things that she's been experiencing and has experienced, and maybe hopefully inspire some of us, especially in the African American community, inspire us, give us some insight as to what she might have gone through, and really give us a raw, unfiltered look at those experiences that she had. So before we jump into the nitty-gritty, just tell us a little bit about you, your dynamic in the household, your role in the family, and where you're from.
Sure. So from everywhere, right? So I am an Army brat. My father made a career of the military.
Nice.
I was born in San Pedro, California at Fort Ord military base. That's not there anymore. A lot of bases have closed down. And then we moved to Germany. And I started preschool in Germany and graduated high school in Germany. And then in the meantime, we moved to different places. So our nuclear family was very small, was my mom and my dad, and then I'm the oldest, and then I had a younger brother. And because we were in the military and we moved a lot, the connection with the larger family, right? We knew them, but it's not like, oh, hanging out with your cousins. And some people have cousins that are close to them, like brothers and sisters. And so we just didn't have that connection with them. We were here in the U.S. We go down south and visit folks, but for the most part, we lived a lot in Europe. So there wasn't that. So we were what we had.
Right,
yeah.
Right, yeah. So before we dive into that, so you were pretty much you were the oldest, so you took care of a lot of things in the family, and you were pretty much looked upon to take care of it, especially since you weren't as connected with the rest of the family.
My parents had really high expectations and just those old Southern ways. My mom was born and raised in Alabama, and my father down by the Gulf of Mississippi, and just my grandfather was a sharecropper. My great-grandfather was a freed slave. I think he was about 6 years old, 5 or 6 when slavery ended.
Wow.
So I think if we count that, I'm probably, 3-4 generations out of slavery.
Yeah.
So my grandfather was a sharecropper, and my mom's job was either you went to the fields or you cooked and kept the house.
Right, yeah.
And so she would tell us about how she was managing a house at 8 years old. And I wasn't cooking at 8 years old, but you know what? I was expected to do a lot.
Right.
And latchkey kid, that was me.
Yeah.
Some people may remember that. You get the
Yeah,
little
yes,
shoestring,
yes,
right?
yes,
And you
I
go in the
do.
house and so, I mean, people would go to jail for that now. An 8-year-old watching a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
So, but that's the way I was raised and brought up. And so just a lot of responsibility that way, and parents kind of living vicariously through their kids. And that happened. And I don't think they recognized it, but there were a lot of things that my parents wanted that because of their circumstances, they couldn't have.
Right.
And so they did a lot to ensure that we were in sports, we got to do after school things and whatnot. They gave us stuff. Stuff was love. Stuff was love.
And now what's great about that is that, and then here you are, dynamic Dr. Felesia Bowen. Can you tell us all of that and all of that, for lack of a better word, grit that you had to kind of endure, but it made you who you are in some aspects. So tell us a little bit about your background. I know you said military brat, military Germany, but tell us about Dr. Felesia Bowen. I want to,
Sure. Well, when I graduated high school, my parents were still in Germany, and I went to Tuskegee University. That was quite the adventure. It was a culture shock for me. It was the first time I had been around that many Black people before, because I grew up on a military base. It was very integrated, and it was the first time I really stayed in the South that long. After a week, I was like, I'm ready to go home, because it was hot. There were big flying bugs. I was just like, oh, what have I done? And people had their parents that came and moved them into campus. My mom and dad were in Germany, so I flew across the Atlantic Ocean by myself and took a Greyhound bus from Atlanta to get to Tuskegee to do all of these things, and was able to do that because, I mean, did I miss not having my mom and dad there? Yeah, I did. But the way that they raised me, I had the skills to be able to maneuver that. And you learn to use what you have. There's all generations there. People think, HBCUs are all first gen, kids. No, there were some really rich kids there. Yeah. But my parents were working, and they would send me $50 a month. And I had to make that $50 last, like for the entire month. So you ate with it, you had to do your laundry with it, all of these things. And so I know what it's like to be broke. And my mother would always say to me, like, you squeeze that Lincoln until he has tears. I just a no quit attitude and can do person. And I try not to let anything beat me or get me down. Some of that's good, some of it's not good. We weren't really emotional in our well, there were emotions. If you were crying, my dad was like, go in there, get your face together and come back, and then we can have a discussion.
Snap out of it.
Yeah, it's right. So, that helped make me the person who I am. But it's not always so good, because I do a lot of stuffing of feelings. And so that's not healthy.
And so what's great about this conversation is that we're going to get all of those feelings out today, because I know, you're the oldest, you had a brother, your mother, and your father, but it was just the four of you.
Yeah. And
then all of a sudden, you had to deal with their passing.
Yeah.
But before that, and just all of the experiences that you had to go through, I know that it could get a little messy. In some of these cases. So I really want to just, beyond just the grief, what really happens in terms of that space where it's between the paperwork and then actually saying goodbye.
There's a lot that happens, I remember I was the one, maybe it was because I was in nursing school or whatever, and I was also an Army ROTC. And so I had to go on active duty right after I became a nurse. And then it's like, boom, you're going to the Persian Gulf War. So I was in the first Persian Gulf War. And I remember writing a list of all of my friends, because I was in college, my parents weren't with me, and it's not like I grew up with kids, and so, you're friends with Sally from kindergarten. So all of the people who meant something to me, I wrote their names down and their phone numbers, because, we didn't have email and stuff back then. And I put in an envelope and I gave it to my dad, and I said, Dad, if I don't come home, if I die, then these are the people that I want you to tell. And he was like, and I was like, no, just keep it closed. Thankfully I came home, and first thing he did was hand me that envelope back, But I brought that subject up to my parents, and I said, if something were to happen to you, what is it that you want me to do? What do you mean? What do you mean? There's a lot that happens. One thing for sure in this life is that when you're born, the clock starts ticking, and you're going to die. We are all going to die. And people don't think about those things as they're going through life. I mean, if you don't want to let that consume your day, right? Because then that's kind of pathological. But we do have to plan. Just like you plan during a pregnancy that you're going to have a baby and what's the room going to look like. And, we have to, at some point, we need to start planning.
Yep.
And then my father, I finally got him and my mom to sit down, and I said, well, what is it that you want? What do you mean, what do I want? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? Okay. I don't want to be burned, blah, blah, blah. And then I asked him, I said, what happens if you can't make decisions for yourself? What is it that you want me to do? And I had that insight from being a nurse,
Right.
Watching people languish on ventilators and stuff. I remember going into a unit, and it was a post-operative unit, and I walked in the door, and I was just like, oh my God, what is that smell? And it was like, that's Mrs. So-and-so in bed, whatever. And I was like, what? And there was this woman who was probably, she looked like she was in her late 70s, had open heart surgery, and she just never recovered. And the family could not discontinue the life support, right? And I thought, that is such a horrible thing to have happen. It really, really is. And I couldn't imagine the amount of pain that she was in. But she couldn't tell anybody she was in pain. You don't say you have pain, they're not going to give you anything for it, right? So I really, for years, would talk to my parents about that. And then finally, I don't know, was probably a little bit before I had my daughter, my father said, I want you to sit down because, we have some stuff. And by this time, my dad had a bad heart. And so by this time, he'd had a heart attack, he'd had open heart surgery, and so he pulled out this folder, and they had gone and bought burial plots, and they had everything, he wanted to be buried in his military uniform and this, that, and the other. And I just said to him, this is good, I'm going to put it right here in the file cabinet. And I said, this is good, but what do you want me to do in the in-between?
Right.
What do you want me to do in the in-between? And so eventually they went and they got living wills.
Okay.
They got living wills, and they got a will made. And, my mom said to me, my brother was kind of out there. He was not, really mature at the time. And her thing was, the boys should be the one, because that's the era she grew up in, right? Like the boys come to the top and, they could do no wrong. And, she was like, but, he's just not responsible. So we want you to take care of everything. So, they told me where everything was. And, then I'm going to fast forward, right? So my mom had gotten sick, and she thought she had appendicitis, So my dad took her in, and she was diagnosed with appendiceal cancer. And so, when they went to take the appendix out, this thing ruptured. And so they got as much as they could. But, being a nurse, I said to the doctor, how do you know? He's like, we had free and clear margins. And I said, what about those other cells? What about those other cells? You can't see the cells. You can see where the cancer begins and ends, and then you cut that part of the colon out and you anastomose, you sew it back together, right? And they were able to do that. And he was like, well, normally we do chemotherapy. And he said to me, but a woman of your mother's age. And I'm like, what are you talking about? A woman of my mother's age? Like, she's only 60-some. Girl, I didn't even know how old my mother was until she I was like, what?
Goodness.
Yeah, that's just the way folks were back then, I never knew how old my mother was until she got sick. Found out she was a couple years older than my dad and all this other stuff. But, I laugh about that now. But then, things started happening, and there were some serious issues with my mother's memory. So I remember being at a conference in D.C., and my phone was blowing up. And so I had to excuse myself, and I answered the phone, and my dad said, I have Dr. whoever on the phone. It was the surgeon who had done the surgery. I guess he took her back for a post-op. And he said to me, your mom is telling me some things and I don't recall any of this. And I'm like, well, what is she saying? She said that she died on the operating room table and that she was coded and brought back to life and this, that, and the other. Do you have any recollection? I'm like, no, they didn't tell me anything like that happened. And then she was talking about the pastor had been at the house. And my father's like, there's nobody has been to the house to do anything. So I asked him, I said, do you think she had a stroke? Do you think this could be a stroke or whatever? And he's like, I don't know what's going on, but she needs a workup. And so I said to him, listen, I've got 3 young children. I'm in DC now. I'm heading back home. I need you to set all of these appointments up. Get everything set up for me over a period of 1 to 2 days. I don't live in Florida where my parents are.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know who's good. And I said, so whoever you would take your mom to, that's who you send my mom to. And they were so good. They got all the appointments lined up. I flew down to Florida, and we were talking. I took my mom to the appointments, and they were doing like the cognition tests. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is not good. So there were signs of like cognitive impairment, and they did imaging, and it came back that she had frontal temporal lobe dementia.
Okay.
So, which is not a pretty type of dementia. It's not Alzheimer's,
Right.
but it's your filter,
Right.
your frontal lobe, the piece of your brain that says, hey, don't say that, maybe you shouldn't do that. And so that filter was gone.
Right. So everything, who knows what was going on?
Oh my gosh, and I was like, Dad, why didn't you tell me that,
Did he know?
He knew her behavior was changing. Like she was getting really aggressive and violent. And looking back, we could see that there were changes in her behavior. But, I just thought like, well, that's my mom, she had a short fuse anyway.
Yeah.
But when she passed, I remember finding little notes around the house where she would write herself notes like brush your teeth. And, channel whatever, just little things like that to sort of trigger her memory. But when we found that out, I was sitting with my mom and dad, and my brother was MIA at the time. Nobody had heard from him or whatever. And I just said, Mom, what is it that you want me to do? What is it that you want me to do? I said, right now, this is progressive, which means that there's no turning it back. It's going to get worse. And I said, right now, you know us, you know who we are. What is it that you want? And she said, I want to stay here. I want to stay in my home. And I said, okay. I said, we'll leave you at home for as long as we can. And I said, but I want you to know that if you're not safe to stay home, it's not responsible for me to leave you at home.
Right.
And we have, especially in our community, we have people that should have been in assisted living long time ago. But the family doesn't want to do X, Y, and Z. So, and then I had to ask that question, what do you want me to do if you pass?
Right.
And I can't find my brother?
Okay.
What do you want me to do?
That must have been extremely difficult. Just all of that coming at you, and you have these 3 young kids, and not only that, but you're not even living in that same area. So tell me, what was like the roughest or the hardest part of this process for you? What kind of broke you or almost broke you in a sense?
Just like the back and forth, because I lived in New Jersey. My parents were in Orlando, Florida. So I would go down, and eventually I just stopped buying round trip tickets because I'd go down and somebody would be sick. And I think the thing that got me was that I really thought, my father was sick too, right? Like now he has a bad heart. Now all this stress is on him, and he's not able to sleep. Right. I remember going down, and I think the thing that was like the, oh my goodness moment for me is that we had taken my mom to a memory care place. And, I got pictures, of her and my dad when they were younger and put them up around the room and stuff. And we had to leave her. And that broke my father's heart. Like it really did. I just remember coming home.
You had to leave her at the memory.
Yeah, we left her at the memory care
Wow.
place, and I wanted to find a place that was going to be good for her, because she got to the point where she just couldn't be, like my father couldn't sleep,
Right.
because she was up wandering, doing all sorts of crazy things, and she wouldn't sleep, part of this dementia. She just walked and she was busy. And so he's trying to be up with her. He's supposed to be resting for his heart. It was like a mess. It was a mess. And he was lying on the floor, and I was like, you're wheezing, because he wanted to take a nap. He was really tired. And I said, I think you need to use your inhaler.
Right.
And so he did, and it didn't get any better. And he had this laboring type of breathing. And I was like, I think you are in congestive heart failure, I mean, he didn't really look puffy to me like you would notice, but I called his doctor, and the doctor was like, okay, get him to the hospital. And he was like, he was having like a heart attack in front of me. And I was like, am I ever going to get out of this?
Right.
And then so I got him well. And then my mom had gotten to the point where she didn't know anybody, and like she forgot she was married. She forgot that I was her daughter, and she ended up she had to be hospitalized. And so I had my dad there with me, and I said, Mom, here's Daddy. And she was like, why are you calling me Mom? I don't have any kids, this, that, and the other. And so, like, she was not nice to me, is that frontal temporal lobe dementia. I mean, they just say the most horrible things. Yeah. And I remember having to tell myself, this is not your mom. That is not mom. That is dementia.
Right.
That's not mom. That is dementia.
That's
and
a lot.
It was. I mean, and then she started escalating. And so I said to my father, it's time for us to go, because, she's getting really agitated, so we need to leave. And she started following us out of the room. And she was just this barrage of, name calling and all sorts of stuff. And I just remember saying to him, Daddy, come over here to the elevator, And the nurses are looking, and my mother's trying to get on the elevator. And I just said to them, what is your process for a patient trying to elope? Like, you guys are standing here. This is not like, Jerry Springer. Like, put your protocols in place and get your patient back into her room. Yeah. And she grabbed me, like she grabbed me pretty hard. Right. And she was like, if you're leaving, I'm leaving. And I said, no, you have to stay here. And my father was like starting, and this is the man who had been to Vietnam twice, and he just looked so lost. And finally, I had to get my mom off of me, right? And I was like, you need to get security. And at that point, she probably lost down to like 110 pounds, like soaking wet probably, But she had such strength, It's like, I don't know where all that adrenaline comes from. But I remember her, the elevator door opened, and I pushed my father into the elevator. The nurses had my mom, and I got on the elevator, and I pushed it, and I said, we're going home. And he said to me, your heart is so strong. He said, I don't know how the things that your mom was saying to you, And I said, well, because Daddy, that's not mom.
Right. How do you feel like, you had to kind of fill in some of those gaps? I mean, you've got, nurses just looking at you. So I'm sure you felt like there might have been a breakdown in some way, so what do you feel like you had to do to fill in? Because I'm sure even from the other aspects of it, not just health, but you've got the legal aspects of it and the financial aspects of it and so many different things. So I'm sure that was a lot coming at you at once.
It was. And, at one time, they have something called the Baker Act, and that's where you can involuntarily commit people, and I think it's like 48 hours that they can get locked up until. Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. So I learned all this stuff through the process. Okay. So I was like, she cannot go home, and so they were able to find a facility for her because she was so aggressive. They were like, we can't put her on a regular psychiatric unit because if she slaps a 23-year-old with mental illness, like it's just not going to be good for her. Right. Mother was 70 some years old. Right. So we found a place that had like a geriatric unit.
Okay.
And I'm lucky because I have medical knowledge. And so I was able to navigate the system to get my mom the care that she needed. Like not just any psychiatrist, but a geriatric psychiatrist, a person that specializes in elder care and dementia and stuff. So they put this Baker Act on, and I remember my dad and I, they had court. They gave her a lawyer and everything.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
So
wow.
court
So
at
it's
the
like
hospital.
a whole entire process.
It's a whole process.
Okay.
So I had to go back to the hospital. They had this room. She had her attorney. The judge is on the video screen. My father's with me. And, they have my mother there. And this attorney is asking, like, the doctor's there, do you want to go home? And she's like, yeah, I want to go home. I could take care of myself, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, no, she cannot, And the lawyer said to me, she has the right to make her own decisions and this, that, and the other. And I lost my stuff.
Yeah.
I lost my stuff,
That's crazy.
I was like, you obviously have no clue. I said, she is not safe. She's not safe to be at home. She's not safe for herself. There's guns in the house. My father had weapons and stuff. I'm like, he can't sleep. He's in poor health. Like, no, she cannot be at home. She needs to stay here until she gets better. She knew her name,
right.
but she didn't know any of this other stuff,
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the things they told me. They said, the doctor said to me, she was masking this dementia. Like she knew something was going on, but she wasn't saying anything to anyone,
Did the doctors ever step in at that point when the lawyers were saying, oh, she can make her own decisions or anything like
They
that?
did, they gave the diagnosis
Okay.
and, what was happening, etc. But I'll tell you when a doctor did step in. So we got my mom into memory care, and she never got adjusted. Like it wasn't far from the house. So my father was there all day, every day. They'd been married for 50 years. They just passed their 50th anniversary when, all hell broke loose.
Right.
And so I remember the staff calling me and saying, we're concerned about your dad. He doesn't look well or whatever. So it was October. I went down for a family meeting, and my dad, we were sitting in this conference room with the physician and the nurse, and there was a social worker and a psychologist.
Okay.
And my dad was like, I want to bring my wife home. And I said, Dad, that is not a good idea. And he's like, she's better. I want to bring her home. And the doctor said to my dad, he said, that's not a good idea. He said, I'm going to tell you why. He said, your heart is weak. Your mind is strong.
Yeah.
He said, your wife's mind is gone, but she's strong as a mule.
Right. Yeah.
And he said, I have seen too many times where people have checked their loved one out of the facility. They've been dead for days, and the person with dementia is still in the home doing whatever, And he didn't want to hear it.
Your dad didn't want to hear it.
He didn't want to hear it. He took my mom home. So I said, because when you pay the beginning of the month, but it goes to the end of the month.
Okay.
So I said to him, you take her home at the top of the month, and if things don't work out, then she still has her bed here. Because when you find a good place, you find a good place, right? And when they're gone, it could be weeks, months before you get a bed in a decent facility again,
that's very true. Yeah.
And people don't understand those things. So long story short, he took her home, and within a week, he was hospitalized on a vent, and he died in the hospital. And, just going to see him, and
A lot.
it was a lot. And I was just the emotions, like I was pissed off.
Yeah.
Because I was like, if you would have left her where she was, I mean, would he have died of heart problems? Yeah, but I don't think it would have been a week after he brought her home.
Yeah. It's hard to know, but that feeling that you have inside of you never goes away.
No. And the hard part too was I never got to be the child.
Yeah.
I had to be the nurse through everybody's death.
Yeah.
Through everybody's death, I had to be the nurse and I had to work. And so it was getting my dad buried and taken care of, and then what am I going to do with my mom?
I'm sure those emotions just kind of, you know, because you have to keep going. You have your own children, you have your own family, you have, you know, so how did all of that kind of forget the, you know, not forget the grief, but amongst all of that grief, how did you get past that I can't take it anymore moments, you know, where you just were like, okay, I've got to think about these next steps now.
Right.
I've got to, you know, unfortunately you have to be strong and
Right.
do these things, you know.
Honestly, I was just like, Jesus, you do this for me, you know.
That's right.
I'm going to honor my mother. I'm going to honor my father. And I don't know about mothers and daughters, but it was a very complicated relationship. And so I was like, and then with my brother, you know, MIA, the whole 9 yards. And, you know, I was just like, I'm the one that's here. You know, I'm the one that's here. So there was a lot of anger.
Yeah.
There was a lot of resentment. And then there was shame, because how can you feel this way? You know, this is your family.
Right.
How can you feel this way?
Yeah.
There was guilt. I wasn't with my kids, you know. And I remember rushing off the plane, getting home just in time to get in the car with my husband to go to my daughter's prom pictures.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
there were many times
Many of
like
those
that.
times.
Yeah.
So what is it that I mean, first of all, your brother, is he in the picture now? Is he around now? Has he passed?
Yeah, I had to bury my brother.
So
All of
almost
my
rinse
Yeah.
and repeat in a sense, where you're just doing the same thing, or did he die of something?
No, I took him off. I took my dad off life support,
Okay.
and then I had to. My brother was there for that, and then my mother, she was at home when she died, and for my brother, he just didn't take good care of himself and whatever, and so I inserted myself, right? Like I was just like, this is enough. I'm coming into the picture. I'm going to take charge, you know. And so went down and basically took a week. He was in the hospital, and I was like, we need this, and this, right? You have to stay on top of people when, you know, when we talk about health disparities and health inequities, I'm like, why doesn't he have this stuff? Why didn't he already have these consults and whatever done? You know, and it's because people didn't want to be bothered with him. Now, he wasn't easy,
Right.
you know, and that's another thing. We go into the hospital or to the doctor's office and we want to act out, talk loud, all this other stuff. It's not called for. And showing your behind isn't going to get anything done any faster, right? So we had to maneuver those things. But long story short, he ended up getting sick. He was on dialysis. He ended up getting sick, was hospitalized. I got a call, you know, and the doctor was like, I said, do I need to come now? And because I was like, I just left, you know, and he said, if you could come now, I think you would feel better. And I said, okay. So I got his kids, I called his kids, and I'm like, get a plane ticket. I don't want to hear anything. There were rough feelings there, you know.
I was going to ask you about that, like that outside circle, the rest of the family.
Yeah.
Like how was that dynamic?
Well, it's like, you just rise to the occasion. You have to take charge, right? Like, here's a man that's dying, and there's somebody telling me that he's not going to make it through the weekend. And then you have children who are hurt, right? And why do I have to do this or whatever? And finally, I just said, you're not doing this for him. You're doing it for you. You're going to come and you're going to do this for you, because I don't want you to go through the rest of your life regretting, I should have, I could have, I would have, you know. And so you're going to come, you're going to say whatever you want to say or not say whatever you want to say. But, you know, there won't be anything that says you aren't there as a child. And so I had to hold up everybody's emotions. You know, his girlfriend, the kids, you know, it was just like, it was a lot. It was a lot. And a lot of different emotions.
Yeah.
And then all I could think of looking at, when I walked in the room, when I tell you every vital organ was being supported, every vital organ was being supported. And so I knew that this was not sustainable.
Right.
And so I got my husband to come down, and then we just ended life support. And you know, the other thing too is people think it's like television, where person has the ventilator taken off and then they're dead and you go to commercial break.
Right.
Dying is hard work. Like my father lived probably for 3 hours after we took the vent off, you know, and then my brother was probably a couple of hours. And so it's not like you discontinue this and then beep. Yeah, it doesn't happen that way.
Right.
It doesn't. Right. I mean, maybe it does for some people, but usually it doesn't.
Right.
And so, you know, just watching that process.
Yeah, that's
And
a lot.
I didn't grieve anybody. I don't think I still have not really grieved. I cried a little when I had to put my brother in the grave, you know.
Why do you think that we don't have these conversations early on? What is in terms of the planning and just being prepared? Because I've seen it, it's happened in my family, it's happened in many people. I'm listening to you now, but yet I think if it was to happen to me on a closer level, I'd be just in the same space. Not almost, is it denial that you could be subjected to it, or are we looking at our parents and uplifting them so high that we're just thinking they have it all together and this could not happen to them because they're so strong? Or
I don't know. I think there's a little of everything. You know, I remember my uncles dying and people having to pass the hat to get so-and-so buried. You're like, what? You're a grown person. You're going to die.
Right.
You know how much a casket, like go online and look it up. Right. Have that out there. Why are you going to leave that on your family?
Right.
I've heard people saying, I don't need to save any money because when I'm gone, I can't take it with me and they can do whatever. Yeah. You know, should we just leave you at the morgue and let you stay there?
Right.
No, people aren't going to do that. And it's such a burden on your family when you don't talk about these things.
Yeah.
It's a psychological burden, like not knowing what your wishes are.
Right.
And I don't know if people think like you're going to take my money or run off or whatever. Yeah. You know, there's a point. If there's any possibility that life could be viable, you know, nobody's going to take you off a ventilator, right? Like doctors won't let that happen, right? Like you'll be in a car accident and you need some support for a couple of days and, you know, they're not going to pose that to you. But we have to get our stuff together, having a will, get your finances taken care of. You know, there's people, they lose the house because great grandma had the house and it was in granddaddy's name, and then when granddaddy died, the oldest brother lived there, and people just squatted in this house, and you come to find out it's not even your place. We don't have anything like that. Go and put the house in someone's name. Have a will. It doesn't matter because a lot of states, you might think you're trying to do something for your family, but in a lot of states, if you don't have your stuff together, if there's not a will, guess what? The state takes everything you have.
They absolutely
and put your people out on the street. They take all your money. You know, I don't know why. I'm getting all worked up here. You know what I mean?
You know
like we got to get our stuff together.
It's a conversation that we need to have.
For sure.
We're here today with Dr. Felesia Bowen, and I'm so excited because we're just talking about some of the things that we don't always prepare for. That living will, that being prepared. What burden, and not even a burden, but what provisions are you going to have for your family in place and in the Black community? So I'm JT Kitt. This is Mindset to Manuscript with JT Speak Your Truth, and we're here with our truth teller, Dr. Bowen, and this is a really, really important conversation. It really touches home to us because a lot of times we just wait for it to happen and then we are amongst it.
Right.
And we don't know even if we've heard about it and even if we've seen someone experience it, it's different when you're in it.
Right.
You know, if you had to, you know, if you could go back, or when you see your loved ones again, you know, you reach those pearly gates or whatever, and you're like, hey, you wait a second, there's something I want to say. What is it that you would whisper to them, you would say?
Well, you know, I have to say, for my parents, they had their stuff, you know, pretty much together.
Okay.
You know, like they had funeral plot, they had all this other stuff. And even though that was really hard for me, we had a discussion.
Good.
Right. We had this discussion about, what is it that you want me to do? And so when things got so hard and it was like, okay, I have to make this decision, right?
Yeah.
I was able to recall those conversations that I had with my parents.
It's important.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is. And so I made my brother, when I went to see him, I'm like, you're going to tell me what you want. Don't leave me guessing.
Right.
You're going to tell me what you want. And so when I see them in heaven, I'm going to be able to say, you know, like, hey, and Daddy, where's the barbecue?
Aw.
Yeah.
Oh,
But,
that's
you know, there's family members, folks
Yeah.
around. And even though they had stuff like that laid out for me for the most part, I can't imagine. It was so hard for me.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what it's like when Big Mama's gone and it's like,
Right.
well, what are we going to do? Everybody's standing around looking at each other,
Yeah.
trying to claw who's going to get
Do
what.
what?
You know
Yeah.
what? I remember telling my brother and other young people too, like, oh, the will and this, that.
Yeah.
Like, listen, you need to get up every day and you go to work and you work for what's yours.
Yeah.
If people think about you to give you something, then that's fine.
Yeah.
But don't wait around for somebody to die before you can do right.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and appreciate people while you can.
Absolutely. I mean, you couldn't have said it better. And what's interesting too is that not everyone has this background either, a medical background.
Right.
So that's a blessing. And through it all, you were a blessing and still are, because you were able to insert some of that
Yeah.
along the way and see it. And regardless of what was going on, they knew that.
Right.
Because you were still you.
Yeah.
And the funny part, when you mentioned that, throughout it all, your mom said, I'm not going anywhere. If you're leaving, I'm leaving with you.
Yeah.
So regardless of what was going on, something stayed connected. She
Yeah.
knew who was there, you know, who was protecting her amongst God and through faith and everything. And that was you, and still is. Even this, and what this conversation that we're having right now, you know, and causing a healing in a lot of different ways, and just getting it out, you know, and because that's traumatic.
It is. I still keep telling myself
That's a lot.
it's complex grief. It really
Yeah.
is, you know, like not really having dealt with the loss of one. And then now
Yeah.
it's like you're preparing for the death of another. You know, and then the thing that I think that just gets me, I have an awesome husband. I have 3 beautiful
Sitting over
children.
there.
Yeah. I have 3 beautiful children. I have the most wonderful niece and nephew.
Yeah.
But I feel alone. My original DNA is gone. And people were like, no, you got your kids. And I'm like,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
Like the DNA that made me,
Yeah.
that was closest to me,
Yeah.
it's all gone.
Yeah. Well, you said it the best when I asked you, what did you do during your breaking points? And you said you gave it to God.
Yeah.
And I think that is really important to remember when we are going through these things where we think we are alone,
Yeah.
and feeling like we are alone, that we're not. And they're still here because they're pushing you through. They got you on the show to talk about it and get it out. And they were like, this girl got to get it out because
Well,
she
you
ain't crying for
know,
me yet.
I really appreciate this opportunity, and I see it as a blessing because I was saying to my husband, and I think I still will. I said, I want to write something and to let people know there's a lot that happens between making a will, signing your, power of attorney, and then dying. And do you know that a power of attorney, when people are gone, it's no longer effective?
No, I didn't even know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that
Wow.
until it was time to go take care of financial business.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, where's the paperwork that shows this, that, and the other? And that.
Wow.
You know why I had that? Because my parents went to an estate attorney.
Okay.
They went to an estate attorney, and so I knew that when they died, I needed to go see this person because I'm at the bank like, well, I have the power of attorney with me, and they were like, they're dead. So that's no good. I was like, oh my goodness.
I had no idea.
I didn't either.
See, that's definitely a book then that needs to come out in terms of just something.
Right.
Something because a lot of times we're thinking we have everything in place and we don't.
No, we don't. Like even getting the insurance papers and stuff. People think they have insurance. Let me tell you, your stomach will be wrapped around your backbone before you get that money because they do everything possible to make a slow payment, right? So knowing where that stuff is, and it's so important. And then you're overwhelmed, and the people at the funeral home. This was a laugh for me. I remember going, the parents had already bought their plot or whatever. So the guy puts me in the little golf cart, and we roll out there. And he says, this is where your parents are going to be buried. Your father, because my mom is still with me. This is where your father's going to be buried. And I said, okay. And he goes, so-and-so is over here, and so-and-so is over here. Is that okay? And I was like, what are they going to do? Get up and have a fight in the yard or whatever? Why are you asking me that? Everybody's dead. Everybody's gone. I don't think you get to roll through the neighborhood and figure out, I don't want to buy this. It's going to be over here. So
this is eye-opening.
Yeah.
Very eye-opening. And I want to thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking up the time all the way from Alabama, coming in. I know you're busy. I know you're just like nonstop, going. So I just want to thank you so much. Hopefully we can have you back when you do have that in place or anything else that you want to share. Because I know you've got a lot of different things going on. I mean, this is just one of so many things.
Surface
stuff.
Yeah, especially that our people need to know things that you don't even think about until you're in those positions.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what I want to say is do right. You told me I could look at the camera.
You could look at the camera.
I want people to do right. Like, get your stuff in order, Get your stuff in order.
Yeah, so important. Well, I want to thank Dr. Felesia Bowen for coming. I really, really appreciate you. I'm JT. This is Mindset to Manuscript. And so we're at mindsettomanuscript.com. It's with the number 2. And we partner with people to do ghostwriting, editing, book coaching. And I launched Mindset to Manuscript in 2024. And then towards the end of the year, decided, a lot of times everyone has a story.
Yeah.
You've got to tell it, and how you tell it is up to you. And a lot of times people think that it has to be written to be told, and it doesn't always have to be written to be told. So this is a platform for people to speak their truth, to speak in a way sometimes where it's their voice and their story and it's authentic experiences. Sometimes it's things that we're not going to find out about you on the internet.
Right.
You can't Google this and be like, oh, okay, Dr. Felesia Bowen went through this. This is this platform to do that, because sometimes it's that healing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's those experiences you don't get to share because you're so used to, like you said, handling things, taking care of things, that you don't get a chance to fall back and think about, well, what made me who I am? And how did I get here? So I want to thank you. I want to thank everyone for joining us on this episode. And I look forward to seeing you on following episodes. Every 2 weeks, we'll be here. So thank you so much, Dr. Bowen.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
It's been great.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Mindset to Manuscript, hosted by JT Key.